Hello, I'm Jenny Lynch, and this is the Creative Science for Kids podcast.
Hi, I'm Matilda, and today's show is all about plants and their adaptations.
Let's go green with 5 fascinating fast facts about fantastic plants, a deep dive into plant adaptations, a question about carnivorous plants, some history of the science of pitcher plants, and a photosynthesis activity for you to try yourself at home. Listen up, because here come 5 fun and fascinating fast facts about fantastic plants.
Facts number 1. A plant is a living thing.
Most plants grow in one place, and they need a few essential things to live and grow. They need water, light, air, and nutrients. Most plants can make their own food. They use sunlight, carbon dioxide gas from air, and water to make sugar and oxygen gas. And this process is called photosynthesis.
Fact number 2. There are lots of different types of plants.
Plants come in lots of different shapes and sizes, from very tall trees to tiny little herbs. There are ferns, grasses, mosses, water plants, seaweeds, and lots more.
Fact number 3. Plants provide food and oxygen for humans and other animals.
We need plants to keep us alive. Through photosynthesis, plants make oxygen gas for us to breathe. They provide food for us to eat, and they also give us fibre to make clothes and wood for cooking and heating and making buildings.
Fact number 4. Plants grow in lots of different climates and environments.
Plants can be found all over the world, in rainforests and deserts, in grasslands and on mountains, in oceans and rivers, and even in the freezing cold environment of Antarctica.
Fact number 5. Plants have adaptations to help them survive.
An adaptation is a feature of a plant that helps it to survive in its particular environment. Depending on where a plant is growing, the location might be very wet or dry, really hot or freezing cold, and the soil might be full of nutrients to help the plant grow, or the soil might have almost no nutrients for the plant. Also, there might be animals and other living things that try to eat the plant.
Let's take a deep dive into some incredible adaptations plants use to survive.
Plants need water to survive, so living in a very dry environment, like a desert, can be a challenge for a plant. Desert plants, for example a cactus, can save water by storing water in their stems and by having very small leaves to avoid losing too much water. Desert plants can also have waxy leaves that reflect sunlight. Having too much water can also cause problems. Rainforest plants usually have shallow roots to soak up water and to take in nutrients that are close to the surface of the soil. Some rainforest trees have buttress roots above the surface of the ground. Buttress roots are very wide and strong, and they make a tree stable so that it won't fall over, even in heavy rain.
In freezing cold environments, plants have adaptations to stop the water inside them freezing to ice. Chemicals called antifreeze proteins in some plants can prevent ice crystals from forming.
Some plants have adaptations to help them survive bushfires. Many Australian native plants rely on bushfires to remove extra leaves and branches and vegetation to allow more sunlight to reach the ground so new plants can grow. Some plants, like the Banksia, need fire to release their seeds, and the chemicals in bushfire smoke act as a signal to the seeds that conditions are good for the seeds to start growing.
Light plays an important role in many plant adaptations because plants use light from the sun to make their own food via photosynthesis. Most plants use blue and red light for photosynthesis, and they reflect a lot of green light, which is why most plants look green.
In a rainforest, it can be pretty crowded, and tall trees block sunlight from other plants down below. Plants compete with each other to get enough light by growing very tall, or by growing on the sides of other plants instead of on the ground, or by forming vines to climb tall trees to reach the top of the rainforest canopy. Camouflage is another important adaptation for some plants. There are rainforest vines that can shapeshift by changing the shapes of their leaves to look like the plants they're climbing on, so there is less chance of their leaves being eaten.
As well as using light for photosynthesis, plants use sunlight to attract insects by having brightly coloured flowers.
Insects help plants by carrying pollen from one plant to another, so the plant can make seeds to grow new plants. In Australia, there's a fuzzy bee called the blue banded bee that makes a very unique buzzing sound. Certain flowers have an adaptation to respond to the sound of the blue-banded bee's buzz. When the buzzing bee vibrates the flowers release pollen so the bee can carry the pollen to other flowers.
Now it's time for a question. Why do some plants eat animals?
You might have heard of carnivorous plants, which are plants that eat animals. For example, the Venus flytrap is a plant that eats flies and other insects by trapping them in specialized leaf parts that can snap shut. Carnivorous plants often live in environments where there are not enough nutrients in the ground, so they gobble up animals to take in all the nutrients they need. Carnivorous plants still make most of their food via photosynthesis. Each trap of a Venus flytrap is made from 2 lobes that are connected to form a shape that looks a bit like an open mouth with spiky teeth. Inside the trap, there are 3 hairs on each side that can trigger the trap to quickly close shut. Insects are attracted by the smell of the Venus flytrap and the red colour inside the trap. If an insect bends 2 of the 3 hairs, the trap closes very quickly and the insect becomes trapped. If the insect is small enough, it might have time to escape, but a larger insect will cause the trap to close tighter until there is no hope of escape.
Of course, a plant doesn't swallow its food like we do. Not that I'd like to swallow a fly. The Venus flytrap makes chemicals that dissolve the insects so the plant can absorb any nutrients it needs. After a few days, the trap opens up so any insects leftovers can fall out of the trap.
Venus flytraps don't just eat flies and other insects, they can eat other small animals like slugs and snails and even tiny frogs. There are over 600 species of carnivorous plants around the world. Some are sticky like the sundew that catches insects in its sticky leaves. Others, like the pitcher plants, have bowl-shaped leaves filled with water for animals to fall into. One type of pitcher plant provides a handy toilet for a little mammal called a shrew. The shrew licks the sweet-tasting leaves of the pitcher plant while sitting on a large bowl-shaped leaf. While it eats, the shrew poo falls into the bowl, providing nutrients for the pitcher plant.
How do we know what we know about carnivorous plants? Scientists and non-scientists have observed meat-eating plants for a very long time, but there's still a lot left to discover.
The pitcher plant that traps shrew poo was thought to only trap insects until scientists made a new discovery about 15 years ago. For 150 years, scientists studied this plant and thought that it mostly trapped ants and other insects. This pitcher plant has huge traps that are big enough to trap larger animals like rats, but scientists noticed that larger animals didn't seem to fall into the traps. So why were the traps so big? Charles M. Clarke from Monash University is an Australian botanist, which is a scientist that studies plants. He was curious about why the pitcher plants growing on the island of Borneo had such large traps.
After studying the plants for many years, Dr. Clarke realized that a lot of their nutrients were provided by shrew poo, and he published a scientific paper about his discoveries in 2010.
In his paper, Dr. Clarke explained how pitcher plants make a tasty sweet nectar for shrews to eat. In return for this tasty snack, the shrews deposit poo into the plants while they eat, and the poo provides nutrients for the plant. In areas where these plants grow, there are not as many insects compared to some other pitcher plant environments, so the shrew poo provides an alternative way for the plant to take in nutrients. One of the things Dr. Clarke measured was the size of the pitcher plant's bowls compared to the size of a shrew, and he discovered that the size of the plant was a perfect size for a shrew toilet bowl. Whether a plant uses nutrients from the soil or from eating animals or animal poo, plants also need photosynthesis to make food so they can live and grow. As well as making sugars, photosynthesis makes oxygen gas.
You can experiment with photosynthesis yourself. You should tell an adult what you are doing and make sure you get their permission first. You will need 2 green leaves, freshly picked from the same plant, 2 jars of water, some paper and a pencil, and a camera if you'd like to take photographs of your experiment.
Place 1 leaf in each jar of water and look carefully at the leaves. If you have a camera, take a photograph of the top and bottom surfaces of the leaves. Place 1 jar in a dark cupboard and leave it there for 1 hour. Place the other jar in a sunny place where it can sit without being moved or bumped. After 1 hour, look at the top and bottom surfaces of the leaf in the sunny place. Can you see bubbles of gas on the bottom of the leaf? Count the bubbles of gas on the bottom of the leaf and write down the number. Carefully take the other jar out of the dark cupboard and look at the top and bottom surfaces of the leaf. Can you see bubbles of gas on the bottom of the leaf? Count the bubbles of gas on the bottom of the dark cupboard leaf and write down the number. The bubbles are oxygen gas, which is made during photosynthesis and released from the leaves. Light is a vital part of photosynthesis, so the leaf that is left in the sun should make more bubbles of oxygen gas compared to the leaf that was left in the dark. And speaking of leaves, it's time for us to leave you. Thanks for listening, and remember to stay curious.
The Creative Science for Kids podcast was recorded on the traditional lands of the Bidjigal people. For more information about Creative Science Australia, visit creativescience.com.au.